units subdued, fly and flee, best baptized, stay anchored, or you'll get lost at sea. Through karmic chains, the true desire strains, longing for limbs wrapped to bring you to the plains. Purple bags blink through the peephole of the door, red flags knocking, yet you think of people from before. Keeping the bottle sealed to the cork pot, saying if I get this, the pain will stop. Feel your feelings, it's okay to feel blue. Reflection is healing, make amends come through. Feel your feelings, it's okay to feel blue. Feel your feelings, it's okay. Let the sum scar blow, shovel black snow, you know sideshow. Self-love like Rousseau, self-education over self-deprecation. Simple aspirations don't switch destinations. Emotions lay between you two, companionship to get you through. The ripples in the water, reflection in the rain. Bottles tipped full of feelings washing over the disdain. Feel your feelings, it's okay to feel blue. Reflection is healing, make amends come through. Feel your feelings, it's okay.
Hopefully you can hear us. We are here from the Boston Public Library, a group of teen and youth librarians, ready to talk to you guys about The Poet X by Elizabeth Acevedo. My name is Laura. I am a librarian at Teen Central in Copley. I'll pass it down to Emily, who is below me.
Emily, I'm the teen librarian at Mattapan. And I guess I'll pass to Danny.
Hi, everyone. I'm Danny. I work alongside Laura at Teen Central in Copley.
Oh, and
I'm
got
Hope. I'm Hope. I am the children and kind of teen librarian at the Ho-Nelson branch, the BPL.
Awesome. So we are excited to talk to you guys about The Poet X today. I know some of you guys have probably read this in school. It is a summer reading book for some of the Boston Public School students this year. So this is a great chance to kind of get a jump on your summer reading, get to know what this book is about. It is a novel told in verse. I know I'm not necessarily a huge poetry person, and this was really like the first book in verse that I read that I was like, okay, like I could be into this. I don't know how you guys feel about kind of poetry and books and how this book played into that for you, and then we'll jump into quotes.
I knew it was called The Poet X, and I feel like that's probably why I never picked it up, because growing up, in high school, I was like, poetry, nah. But I am glad that I did get to know this story, and it is told really well. And yes, it's a book of poetry, but it's worth the read. Y'all are going to enjoy it.
I love poetry. I didn't have that much experience with verse novels before this one. And I think they're kind of exploding right now. But this is probably like my second or third one. Yeah, I'm not sorry.
I I read this book last year, and that was kind of my first reintroduction to novels and verse. And then from that point, I've started reading more, especially Elizabeth Acevedo's work. So.
Definitely. All right. So we're going to jump in, pull some quotes for you guys to talk about to guide us through the book. So we can pull up the first one. And teens, if you're in the chat, if you have questions about this book, other books, anything, just let us know. So the first thing we're going to talk about in this book is the idea of body image and body confidence and what that means for Xiomara, our main character. So the first quote that we have here is, when your body takes up more room than your voice, you are always the target of well-aimed rumors. And I think this really exemplifies her relationship with her personality, her body, herself, because she finds herself at the center of attention because of her body and feels like she has to fight back, but seems to like really in her heart and soul be more of a quiet person. So I don't know what you guys thought about this one. If we've got no thoughts, we can move on to the next one. I think we've got some more in-depth things coming up. Yes. And this is another one that I think kind of goes along with that. She's talking about the boys. I think this might have been maybe at the basketball game. I'm not sure.
I think so.
But although I like to look, I hate to be seen. I feel like the middle school, high school experience in particular, like this really cuts to the core on that.
Just the idea of having too much body and not enough voice, I feel like, is the teenage experience. Like, not wanting to be seen, but wanting to be heard more than you are. And, like, there were parts of this that it felt like she really just wanted to be a voice. She wanted to disconnect from her body completely, but part of that was definitely stuff going on at home that we'll talk about later. But, yeah, I mean, just wanting to leave your body behind at a certain stage because it's causing you so many problems, I could definitely relate to.
Definitely.
I think this is also interesting in connection with the last quote because she makes it clear that she kind of can't get away from her body. It's just kind of always present and people are always commenting on it. And so I think that urge to be not seen is even more prevalent than it had been in the past. And like, I think it's also that tie-in of like, I like to look, I like to watch other people. It's such a clear thing. I remember doing when I was a teenager of like being fascinated by everyone else around me, but not wanting people to do the same to me.
For sure. And it really like sets in that feeling, I think, of like, well, I'm watching other people, so they must be watching me in the same way. That like creates this spiral of anxiety that you definitely see. So you can go to the next quote, talk about this some more probably. All right, so we've got a long one here. So when everyone in middle school was playing Truth or Dare, or whatever their excuse to get their first kiss, I was hiding in big sweaters, I was hiding in hard silence, trying to turn this body into an invisible equation. Which again, really powerful, and also I think really speaks to this dichotomy of when you're a young woman that has a body that society finds easy to sexualize, you are judged just for how you look, even if you are like so much more chaste than your peers that look differently from you. And how she feels like she has to, we'll definitely talk about this with family, I'm sure, but like everything about herself, she feels like she has to change for other people for all these different reasons.
And just, we haven't really gotten into the. I'm jumping ahead with topics with some of
That's
these, but like,
fine.
'cause I know expressing your voice is the last topic, but in terms of her poetry, we can see that she really does want to take up space and like wants to be this person that people see or hear, but like not in the way that it's currently happening. She wants to define how people perceive her when she puts herself out there, and her body is like this obstacle that gets in the way of that.
Yeah, like, it's the reoccurring theme, and it's hard to get out of from the book. But you just hear the things like she doesn't want to be this sex symbol that she gets put into. She doesn't want to be. She gets those labels of the loose girl, the hoe, the slut, like, and yeah, and when that quote, that's why she'd rather just hide, and while everybody else is experimenting, learning, whatever. It was a reoccurring theme throughout the book, and it was hard to get through.
Yeah.
She also,
definitely-
her body is. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Her body is also what she uses to like get into fights to defend herself against some of these things and to defend her brother, and she really doesn't want that either. Like, she doesn't want to be this weapon. She wants to use her voice as a weapon. It's like body versus voice is kind of a battle throughout the book.
Yeah, definitely. And I don't know if she ever really like necessarily finds that happy medium. She finds a way to make her voice stronger, but I think throughout the book it's clear that like dealing with her body, she's still gonna have work to do, which again I think is like pretty realistic.
Super realistic, because as a teenager, no. You had to learn to love a lot of things, and that was not happening as a teenager.
Yeah.
I think what this quote brings up for me is that like she is stuck in almost this like, so much of society sees her as like a hoe or as a slut because of her body, but at the same exact time her mom is pushing her to be like this like Virgin Mary-esque character. Like, I think she says like, my mom's turning me into the nun she can never be, and like I think it's this, and she's just like, I just want to be a teenager. I want to kiss a boy. I want to hold hands with a boy, and that's it. And she's either a hoe or like has to be incredibly pure, and she can't stand being in that stuck position. So.
Yeah, definitely. All right, we can go to the next quote. Another one just kind of going off the same topic we've been talking about. And I think of all the things we could be if we were never told our bodies were not built for them. And I pulled this one because it brought her boyfriend into it. This is when they were going figure skating together, and it turns out that he is like very skilled at ice skating, and it's something that he really loved, but he was always told like, this is not a masculine thing to do, this is not an interest that it's appropriate for you to have. So she's kind of talking about how he could have had this great talent, but because he's expected to be a macho guy, he had to give it up and not pursue that, so that, you know, while her body is controlling her in the ways we've been talking about, that all these other people in her life, they're being controlled by their bodies in other really unfair ways too.
I forgot what part that quote was from, and that makes so much sense now. There's so many parallels between her and Amon that I kind of forgot about in terms of the stuff that they're dealing with. We get to that more later with like his music and her poetry.
Yeah.
I think it also brings in kind of, it makes me think of her brother too, her twin, that they're supposed to be so similar and yet they're polar opposites, and her brother is like almost the exact opposite in regards to like how he's seen by society, because he's just seen as like, he's seen as smaller, which is considered bad, as the same way she's considered like more like the way she's seen by society is considered bad, and the way he's seen by society is considered bad, but they're polar opposites. It's interesting to see everyone kind of have this same issue.
Yeah, I think it's really powerful even to have it as kind of side plots for these secondary characters, because it is so important to have media that talks about like what it is to be a young woman, particularly a young woman of color, in your body and what that means. But things are really hard for young men too, and they have a lot of judgments and expectations placed upon them in different ways, but coming from the same kind of patriarchal macho aspect. So I thought it was good that this was in here. We can go to the next quote now. This one, I think, just more the same of what we've been talking about, so I'll read it, but we can keep going. At the same time that I wish my body could fold into the tiniest corner for me to hide in. Just again, this idea of her trying to make herself small because she does not want to be perceived. We can go to the next one. Perfect. So we are going to go into talking about family now. We've definitely touched on this a little bit in terms of her mother and her twin brother. But let's get into this some more. There is a lot to talk about here. So starting out as just kind of an overview of her and her mother. This is talking about a bracelet that her mother gave her, which reoccurs throughout the story. Maybe one of you guys wants to talk more about kind of the plot line of the bracelet, but it says daughter on one side and her name on the other. So she says, her daughter on one side, myself on the other. This idea that her mother's daughter and she herself are the same, but also very different.
When I first read this quote on this list, I was like, where was that? But yeah, the bracelet, I completely forgot. And it's that just that theme throughout the book of a love-hate relationship that I feel like a lot of little girls go through with their moms, because and we'll see it when we talk about other quotes. It's like, you know, her baby that she sees herself in, and then, you know, we reach those teen years and mom is like, what is going on? Like, you're not like this perfect little angel. But we'll get more into that with the other quotes.
I think it's interesting with the bracelet that the pivotal point with the bracelet is that it breaks off when she's having that argument with her mom, like that the like final big huge fight, like that is like noted that it breaks off of her and she gets like really upset. Like it later gets repaired as they're repairing their relationship, and I think it's just such an important symbol of like her kind of separating from her mom and her tug towards wanting to be her mom's daughter while feeling like it is not who she is completely.
Yeah.
I got so mad when they fixed that bracelet. I got really mad at this book in general. Because her mother to me was horrible, but I get there was a lot of nuance in that relationship.
It was heavy.
Yeah.
There was a lot. There were so many quotes there's so many of her poems, so many of her stories of like, I wish my mother would listen to me. These are things that I wish I could tell her.
Yeah. And then she reads. We'll get to that later.
Yeah. All right. Next quote. So this one is about her brother, so we'll switch to twin for a little bit. Her brother's name is Xavier, but she calls him twin because only she can call him twin, so it's like their special thing. So this is about their relationship, and I wonder if twin and I are keeping each other small, taking up space that would have let the other grow, which I think is a really, again, realistic way to think about your family when you're a teen, that you want to be close to them, but you also want to separate from them a little bit. And just this idea of, by staying with what I'm comfortable with, am I limiting who I could become? Just felt very true to me.
It's interesting that he, throughout the book, sort of feels like she's fighting his battles for him, and she feels like he's not supporting her in hers at all. They have kind of, and yet they like clearly love each other very much, are very, very close, but they're each sort of giving each other the opposite of what they need for what they're going through.
My thought when I read this quote is it reminded me a lot of like twins in a womb too, of like a lot of times twins are born a lot smaller because they can't grow as big as a normal baby, and so that makes me like, that was the imagery I got when I read this quote about twin. And I just the fact that they're both like 16 years old and are also still sharing a room is interesting to me as to like adult or like young adult siblings. Like, I know if I had lived with my siblings when I was a teenager that close, it would have not gone well.
Yeah. I'm an only child, so I don't have like as much insight on this one, but I just thought it was a good quote. We can go to the next one. So still talking about Twin, and like we kind of touched on with her defending him. I know I won't be able to defend Twin forever, but I thought when it happened, it would be because he fought for himself. He would fight for himself, not just find someone else to protect him. And this one I pulled because, I mean, it's definitely about her twin relationship. This is about when he gets a boyfriend and starts kind of finding his own way through that. But I think even beyond the sibling relationship, this is again just a really relatable teen experience of people that you have been very close to, finding other people, whether that's partners, other friends, whatever, where your role in their life doesn't become less important but changes in some way, and how you can be happy for them but also like really devastated by it.
Yeah, this poem, or that quote, I was kind of confused when I read it because I didn't get that vibe from the brother. Just like, I thought it was just like, you don't have to keep doing this for me. And I wonder if like she just interpreted it as like, okay, like you just moved on and now you have someone else fighting your battles for you. Like he may have been growing up too, and not necessarily just went and found another protector. I don't know. I had mixed feelings about this part with Xiomara. I was like,
And I do kind of like the idea. Sorry, go.
No, you go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I kind of like the idea that they're both growing up, but they can't see it in each other, because I think that makes a lot of sense for siblings and for twins to like not expect the other person to be going through all the things that you are.
One of the things that when I read this part, I think what came to mind was the fact that like everything that she had defended him against before was like bullies or easy to defend, and when she kind of figures out that he has a boyfriend and that he's gay, I think I almost read it as she realizes like she can't defend him against her own parents who are not going to be happy with that decision, nor is she going to be able to protect him throughout the rest of his life. Like, maybe he'll grow up and go to college and he'll be fine. He won't be around those people anymore or whatnot. But like, I think him accidentally coming out to her as gay, because he didn't do it on purpose, like, really was her realizing, like, there's some things in the world I can't defend him against regardless of how strong I am. And that's how I kind of read it. But I also agree with that, like, you don't, as you and your siblings grow up, you don't really notice that your guys are growing up. You think of them as the same. I know, like, my sisters, because they left the house when I was like 12, they still think of me as like 12 or 13, though I'm in my 20s now. So
yeah, they definitely have, everyone in this family, like, very complicated relationships. And I think the scene when she sort of is coming to terms with the fact that he's gay, that was also, I think, a pretty tough scene, because she is really not the most, like, empathetic in her internal thoughts at first. So I was glad to see that she came through for him pretty quickly, despite some initial misgivings, perhaps, which I think, like you guys were saying, she was just really worried about how that's going to affect his safety, but she could have reacted better. We can go to the next one. And this one is a little bit more about just friendship. But I think her close friends really are also her family. So I included it here. Maybe the only thing that has to make sense about being somebody's friend is that you help them be their best self on any given day. And I forget her best friend's name.
Hey, Carida?
Caridad.
Yeah.
But I loved their friendship and this quote so much, because she talks a lot about how their friendship might not make sense to a lot of people because they're so different, and they've grown up together. But Caridad is, like, very religious, very quiet, and Xiomara is, you know, she gets into these fights. She's more artistic. She doesn't just kind of follow the rules. But they still really love each other, spend a lot of time together, and are best friends even though they're so different. And this is, like, so much like me and my best friend. Like, I am very much, like, follow the rules. I was the shy kid and she was very much, like, outgoing. I'm gonna do what I want to do. And even though we don't necessarily have a lot in common in that way, this idea of helping each other to be our best selves and, like, pushing each other and pulling each other in important ways just really, like, again, struck true to me about my own life. So I liked seeing a friendship like that represented.
I feel like you can kind of see this quote with Aman too, with the fact that at a certain point he doesn't stand up for her and she gets really upset about it, but he's like, it's not a perfect, none of her relationships are perfect, but the people that are really there for her and, like, encourage her writing and encourage her to be herself and kind of come into her own are the people that she considers friends. And that's, like, her baseline for friendship, is people that help you grow even if things go wrong along the way.
Yeah. All right, we can go to the next one. So going back to her family and her parents from the beginning. My parents probably wanted a girl who would sit in the pews wearing pretty florals and a soft smile. They got combat boots and a mouth silent until it's sharp as an island machete. I know everyone has a lot of feelings about her mom in particular, but maybe also her dad. So I'll let you guys jump in. Does anyone want to start talking about either of those relationships? I see Emily nodding.
To start, but yeah, her mom made me really angry, but her dad, it was interesting how little he came up until the end. And then at the end he's sort of suddenly very important, but throughout the book he's this very absent figure that just kind of, we just assume that he agrees with everything that her mother's saying about her, and at the end it sort of seems like he's maybe been holding back. No.
I think, again, it kind of speaks to the idea of her mom in particular wanting a girl who will sit in the pews wearing pretty florals. We talked a little bit about before, like her mom is trying to make her live the nun life that she wasn't able to live that she wanted.
Yeah, I think what I find really interesting, particularly about the beginning of the book, because I kind of tracked this as I was going through, is how much religious imagery is tied to her life at the beginning, and how as she separates from her family and becomes more of her own person, that religious imagery kind of drops away. And I think like this quote especially, like I just like it's a great way to describe who she is in comparison to who her parents want her to be, because she is very much this person who will fight and who will be like who will speak with her words instead of with her mouth, and she is caught by that force of like her parents trying to force her into this cookie cutter role that she cannot be, that her best friend is kind of in a way. And so I think that could even make it harder, because when like your parents see your best friend doing what they want you to do, they're like, why can't you just be like her, or like your twin who is doing all the sort of church stuff that he does as well.
Yeah. We'll go to the next quote. Recently, she's got all kinds of devils inside of her. They probably come from you. It's that age. Teenage girls are overexcited. Puberty changes their mind. Son locas. Danny, did you pull this one?
I did, because I thought it depicted the family complication really well. And also just from that teen perspective of, there's not that open dialogue like every single day. Like this wasn't a you come home and you talk about your day household. This was a do your job. Your job is to be a good girl. Your job is to be a perfect son. That's it. And then to have the kids overhear like their family, like this is what your dad says, and then this is what your mom says. And then it was heartbreaking also because you as an adult reading this, you can tell like, oh, like they're fighting with each other, you know, over each other's situations. Like she just like they're snapping at each other over their own relationship. And instead they're taking it out by like throwing jabs about their kids. They're like, well, you did this. No, you did this. And all the kid gets to do is just overhear it. And it just adds to that internalization throughout this book of like, I'm always doing something wrong. Always. I thought that's the main reason I pulled this quote of like, there's so much in this to explain their relationship.
Yeah.
I find it interesting that her dad really only appears with these arguments, like either like he only really appears when they're discussing like her or her twin. That's it. I also, the last part of like teenage girls are overexcited, puberty changes the mind, son locas, like the amount of times I heard stuff like that when I was a teenage girl of like, oh, it's puberty, or oh, it's like teenage girls and their hormones. So like that, I remember when I read that, like I almost eye rolled. I was just like, this is such a stereotype of teenagers and specifically teen girls.
Yeah, and just it's like the dichotomy, I guess, of adults saying, oh, emotions are bad, teenagers are too over emotional, while they're having this like big fight themselves and are in fact being the ones who are unreasonable and not managing their emotions correctly. Like, of course. Next quote. And I loved being her reward, the golden trophy of her life. I just don't know when I got too big for her appointed pedestal. Again, I think we touched briefly on the idea of as she grows up, she goes from being her mother's perfect daughter to her own person. And I think this imagery just like gets right to the heart of that growing up and growing too big to just be what your parents want of you.
I feel like it really kind of shows where things went wrong in their relationship, because like when you were little, you really do define yourself by your parents and like the way they are or what they want you to be. And as she gets older, she no longer wants to do that, but her mother is still doing it. She's defining her daughter entirely like by herself and by her own standards instead of by looking at who she actually is, which is like the poetry basically encapsulates who she is, and that's why her mother can never see it. And we know what happens at the end.
And I think also, I don't know that we've talked about this yet, but just the idea that her and Xavier were basically miracle babies. They didn't think they were going to be able to have kids. They were kind of like a last chance surprise. And I think that adds even more stress to this whole situation, both for her and for her mom, of her mom having greater expectations, because it's like she thinks that God gave this gift to her. So, you know, they must have something great in store that fits what she thinks is right. And then as the children, knowing that that is what you are, that you are the miracle child, like that's so much pressure.
Yeah, and just hearing you say that, like, and hearing the quote again is like that thing of like, I thought I was only, I thought I was enough just that I was here, just that I was born. Like, yeah. What do you mean I have to do X, Y, and Z for you now?
Yeah.
It also makes me think of the first, like one of the first poems where they talk about how she was really difficult when she was born. Like she was like coming out fighting, and I can't remember the phrase they use in that entire poem, but like for her to be told like you've been difficult since you were born, I think just lent her to be like, well, how do I not do that? And I would assume like I would feel like as like a little kid, you would be like, okay, I'm going to do everything my parents want me to do because that's how I appease them. But as you get older, you're like, but I want to be my own person. I think there's even a poem in here where she talks about being like, I'm supposed to be this person, I'm supposed to be this person, I'm supposed to be this person. When am I supposed to be me? And like that resonates so deeply with me as a teenager. So
for sure. Next quote. All right, so the next one is finding your voice. Before we skip to finding your voice, I do just want to say one more thing about her mom. When her mom rips up that notebook, I felt that so hard. Like, I have never experienced anything like that in my own life, but the way that Elizabeth Acevedo wrote that, you could just feel it in your soul. So really good writing, but woof, that was rough.
I stopped reading for about a month after that. And finished yesterday.
I think I had the equivalent of like, this is a horror movie. I don't want to watch this happening, because I could read it and I was like, oh no, she's gonna do it. I know she's not gonna save it. I just know it's gonna go bad. And I remember just kind of going in shock for a little bit of like, oh yeah, she really just stabbed her in the heart. But okay, all right.
The first time I read it, I was like 10 o'clock at night and I was just sobbing. Like, I had to put down the book because I couldn't read more because I was crying too hard. Because it's like, I felt the heartbreak in my own heart when she started beating her like heart, being like, you have to burn me. Like, I lost it. I was fully in tears.
Oof. So very powerful and a good transition to talking about finding your voice. So the first one that we have here is her just kind of getting into poetry and spoken word poetry. My little words feel important for just a moment. This is a feeling I could get addicted to. I don't know that we really need to super talk about this one. I think it's just a really good introduction to the idea of Xiomara finding poetry and spoken word. So you can go to the next one. I want to make sure we get through all the quotes. So this one, Tuesday has become my equivalent to Mommy's Sunday, a prayer circle. And Tuesday is when she has her poetry club meetings. I know, Hope, you talked a little bit about the religious imagery before, so maybe you want to start in on this one.
Yeah, this is one of my favorite quotes in the entire book. Mostly because, one, I love the idea that church and religion can be something that isn't church and religion. So I love the fact that prayer circle can be you being in a poetry club.
Yeah.
But yeah, the religious imagery, and this is one of the closer to the end religious imageries that she pulls out. But she compares herself a lot to Eve and her mom to the Virgin Mary, and just there's a lot of religious symbolism in here. And I think this is the first time it's used in almost a positive manner. Most of the time it's used as a negative thing, or to invoke a metaphor of something negative. And so I think it's almost poetry is her healing from her religious trauma that she faces through most of the beginning of the book.
Yeah.
I feel like there are a lot of comparisons or contrasts between her mother's religion and her poetry, and it kind of culminates in that scene where she burns the book, because her mother is yelling prayers and she's yelling her poems, and they're literally dueling religion and poetry, religion and self-expression.
Yeah. And it's interesting also how not only does this poetry club become her equivalent to that, but it also replaces the confirmation class that she was taking. So it really is kind of a one-for-one trade of she is replacing her mother's religion with her own religion in that exact time slot, which is cool. And we support that. You do you and find what makes you happy. So the next quote we can go to says, "When has anyone ever told me I had the right to stop it all without my knuckles or my anger, with just some simple words?" And again, going back to stuff we talked about at the beginning, that she finds herself fighting a lot for herself, for her brother, but she doesn't want to fight. But until she's kind of found the power of spoken word poetry or just written poetry, and had this teacher that is willing to show this to her, no one had ever told her you don't have to fight. They just told her don't fight.
I think what's important too with this quote is that, to me, one of the things I always remember, or I try and remember throughout the entire book, is that it's her brother who gives her the notebook, right, that she writes in, and she uses so much of her fists as a way to protect him, and this, I feel almost is his way to protect her from the anger and the fighting, is to say you can write it down, you can let it out in a way that isn't that, and it will help you. And so it's almost his way of protecting her, which I thought was really cool.
I didn't think of that, but that is definitely true. All right, we can go to the next one. one is a little long. Every day I searched for new songs, and it was like applying for asylum. I just needed someone to help me escape from all the silence. I just needed people saying words about the things that hurt them. I'm going to pop this one to Danny because I know she and I briefly had a conversation the other day about not being huge poetry fans when we were growing up, but loving music and how music kind of is poetry. So do you want to talk about this a little bit?
Yeah, this is the bigger quote that like really spoke to me throughout the whole book, because the whole book in general was hard for me to go through because I was like, oh no, story of my life. When it came to the music part, like that was definitely like my asylum of like not hearing other people talk about this stuff, but going to certain lyrics, especially like finding like certain and she they throw in Kendrick and J. Cole and Nicki Minaj a lot, and finding all those like hidden gems of like true stories in rap. I really like that she incorporated into this work, because like so many times like music gets categorized as this and that, but when to certain people it helps so much. And I really connected with this quote and just this part of the story of she didn't have these voices around her, but with her and with Amon, when it came to lyrics, like she knew they were out there, and then she herself went on and became one of these performers. But yeah.
Yeah. I don't know about you guys, but I think for me, even being very far removed from my teenage years, when a song comes on that is something I listened to a lot for emotional comfort when I was like in the 13 to 17 age range, it just like immediately takes you right back there. So I think like music really does have a lot of power, and it's always nice to see that recognized in a book too.
Yeah. I remember the first time I actually truly felt like I understood poetry was I had a teacher in high school who made us bring in our favorite song and then recite it like it was poetry. And I think that was the first time that I actually connected the like idea that like, oh, songs are pretty much poetry, because I hated poetry before because it was all like read Shakespeare's sonnets. I was like, why? And so, but yeah, that whole idea that like songs can be a asylum is like such a, even now I use songs as a way to escape what's going on in my life, and it's such a clear and present. And I think the songs, especially being such a connection to Amon, is a big deal too in there. So
yeah. All right, next quote. So this is the last one, right? I believe. Category is going to talk about her kind of straddling two worlds. So we're going to talk about her mom a little more. We're going to talk about just all the facets of her life in general. So the first one we have is hiding in my journal is the only way I know not to cry. My house is a tomb. This kind of touches on what Hope was saying before about the journal being protection in its own way.
Yeah, definitely. And how she, outside of writing, she can't be who she is.
I think it's interesting that we talked about like poetry is her outlet for her anger and her pain, and music is kind of Amon's, because I think for her mom that outlet is prayer and like is religion, but she's sort of weaponized that against the other members of her family and like made their house feel like a tomb, which is not, I guess it comes back to that, like her children are projections of herself and they have to like seek their solace the same way that she does, and if they don't, it's basically destroying their home lives.
Yeah.
Isn't this quote right after, and correct me if I'm wrong if it's not that place, isn't this right after her mom finds out that she's dating Amon and like gets really mad at her? Isn't that when this appears? But I can't remember exactly.
Sounds like it is.
Right.
And she like
Yeah.
is forced to kneel and write.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so like that also, like, especially when you go through like a traumatic experience like that, sometimes like the words can't come out in like speaking. And I remember, I think at this point too, like her brother has given up on trying to like make sure she's okay. He just like, will like bring her an apple and walk away. Like he like knows she doesn't have the words. So yeah, I think that's yeah.
Yeah. All right, next quote. It is ungrateful to feel like a burden. It is ungrateful to resent my own birth. I know that Twin and I are miracles. Aren't we reminded every single day? And this definitely kind of talks about that pressure that I mentioned before of she knows she was a miracle baby, so she feels like she has to be grateful for everything. But also her mom weaponizing this to try to manipulate her into being who she wants.
Yeah, I mostly loved the irony of the last line of "Aren't we reminded of that every single day?" Or like the sarcasm really is how I read it at. It's like, yeah, I'm this gift and I'm certainly treated like a gift.
And like the idea that she lives in an abusive household, and a lot of people think of abuse as being like people telling you that you're worthless and you can't accomplish anything, but the fact that telling you, like holding you to higher standards, can also be a form of abuse because you're never going to live up to them.
Yeah. All right, next one. I should be used to it. I shouldn't get so angry when boys, and sometimes grown-ass men, talk to me however they want. And this kind of wraps around back to the beginning, but even beyond her body, just like as a young woman, and particularly a young woman of color who are often forced to grow up more quickly because of how society views them, that she just feels like being catcalled and ogled and objectified is just a fact of life, and she should again just deal with it, which is very sad.
Yeah, I pulled this one because how do you get in that category of living two worlds? Like, how do you get to be yourself and then be okay with constantly being treated like this? Like, it's just you just can't.
Yeah, it's like with her mom, she has to try to be one specific person. When she goes out in public, she has to try to be one specific person, and there's really no room for her to be herself until she finds poetry. We can go to the next one. Okay, we have a long one. This love and distance I feel for him. He's older by a whole 50 minutes and a guy, but never defends me. Doesn't he know how tired I am, how much I hate to have to be so sharp-tongued and heavy-handed? I know, Danny, you pulled this one too, if you want to start.
I feel like this one was more of a public service announcement for me.
All right, get on your soapbox.
No, just being there of like, you know, the gender roles of things, of being that girl and like having to like do the, you know, fight other boys, men, or this, and her brother or Aman too, of like, you're a guy, like, can you help me and put a stop to this, like, please? Like, how, like, that was what pulled this quote to me the most, and especially like the straddling two worlds of like fulfilling roles and then not I don't know, just falling into not taking care of each other.
I think it's interesting to look at this from the perspective of both Twin and Amon, because from the perspective of Twin, it's like she's expecting him to fall into the prescribed macho gender role and defend her, when that's just really not who he is. And so she's putting these expectations on him and kind of on herself to defend him, when neither of them has to be that person if it's not who they are. But then with Amon, when she gets mad at him, it's for like she is harassed in front of him and he doesn't stand up for her. And it's not in like a fighting way, it's in a like, if someone you care about is being harassed, you say something. And that's not like a gender thing, that's just like a good person thing. So it's interesting to look at it from kind of both of them. I don't know.
Also, the fact that they all have they place these expectations on each other to like stand up for each other, and meanwhile the adults are apparently doing nothing in terms of stopping any of this or protecting any of them, and they don't even really think to look to them, except for her teacher to a certain extent.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting. I'm thinking about this quote in the, like, with the quote about how, like, her brother doesn't need her to defend her anymore, and thinking about how they can't see each other, really, about how she's like, please, like, stop making me defend you, and she's like, I don't need, like, and he's like, I don't need defending, but they're not communicating that to each other, and so they're, like, both exhausted and can't. And in regards to the parents, I think about the fact that when he comes home with that black eye, she immediately gets blamed for it. Like, she's like, they're like, what
Every
did you do?
time he
It's
gets
like,
hurt, like,
what?
she's the one
Yeah.
that's like prime suspect.
When he's sobbing, her mom just assumes it's her that made him cry, and I'm like,
Very frustrating. All right, next one. When I was little, I loved Mass, the clanging tambourines and guitar, the church ladies singing hymns to merengue rhythms. When I look around the church and none of the depictions of angels or Jesus or Mary, not one of the disciples, look like me, morenita and big and angry. And this is kind of about her starting to lose her faith and not seeing herself represented in her faith. I don't know. Any thoughts?
Kind of that contrast again with like the music and the celebrations at Mass. Like, she used to relate to that as like an artistic outlet or a spiritual outlet, but then not seeing herself in it and seeing herself in poetry, she sort of made that switch. And her mother clearly like feels represented by the church and like by the beliefs that she encounters there. So there's so much we don't know about like her mother's backstory that I would be really interested to know.
Yeah, she definitely has been through it too and hasn't dealt with it, so she takes it out on her kids. All right, let's go through the last ones pretty quick so we can wrap up on time. I always think it's not going to be a problem, then it always is. Just because your father's present doesn't mean he isn't absent. We've definitely talked about this. Her father is there during the book, but he's not really there. He just pops up at opportune moments to kind of make final decisions, and there's some hope at the end of the book, but he is one of the many adults in this book who could step up and does not. Next slide. My mother never came, you know. She would call every day at first and always tell me the same thing. She was handling affairs. We'll be together soon. This is about Amon, I think, and how his mother did not come to the U.S. with them and coming to terms with that and just I think, Danny, if you want to talk about this one really quickly since you pulled it.
No, it's just definitely in line with the literally straddling two worlds theme of there's just different stories for absent parents, and Amon's happened to be that his mom is in a completely different country, and it's just sad.
Yeah.
One of those things that ties them together. They both have sort of an absent parent, even though only one is literally absent.
Yeah. Next slide. Mommy was my hero because she barely spoke English and wasn't born here, but she didn't let that stop her from defending herself. Like we just talked about, her mom has a very interesting story. There's this, she wanted to be a nun. Instead, she had to marry Xiomara's dad, and she resents that because he was a bit of a player. So just the idea that someone who's kind of the villain of the story has her own origin story, I think that made her end up that way. And like Danny's talked about, straddling two worlds and how hard it must have been for her to come here. Next slide. The ultimate actress because I'm always pretending I'm blind, pretending I'm fine. I should win an Oscar. I do it so well. I think this is a good ending slide because this is definitely how she is in the beginning, and by the end when she finds that poetry, she finally is able to express her emotions to her mom, to the world, and she doesn't have to pretend anymore. I don't know, any last thoughts? I think this is our last quote, and then we'll do some quick event announcements.
It's a good read, y'all. It's a good read.
It's rough.
It's rough. It's heavy. It's a well-written story. I feel like all the characters, even Caridad, was just, yeah. And even though it's a novel in verse, like you get a lot about each person.
Oh yeah.
If anyone forces you to kneel on rice, please tell a trusted adult. I have a lot of thoughts on all of that, and then like her teacher's reaction to all of that. But
yeah, there's a lot to cover. So even if you watched all this and haven't read it yet, you can still read it and get a lot out of it. We're going to talk about some upcoming events really quick. Hope, did you want to talk about summer reading to start us off?
Sure. So summer reading is coming up on June 14th is when it starts. So that's next Monday. And it goes for 9 weeks. So it'll be done on August 13th. And you can get a bookmark from any of the open branches or central. And you just fill it out with 9 books you've read or 9 programs you went to or a combination of either. So if you went to this and then you went and read the book, you can put both of those on there. And then you turn it into any of the branches, and we will, and you'll be entered in to win a raffle prize at the end of the summer. So, yeah.
Nice. Danny, would you like to make our big announcement?
Big announcement.
That we, what happens on Monday?
I'm just kidding. Little birdie. No, it's okay, Chris. We will be open on Monday for the public. So the details that I do have of Copley are y'all can come, y'all can study, y'all cannot travel into McKim just yet. But teens, come upstairs, come see our faces. And I don't have too many branch details, but y'all are opening Monday as well, right?
Yeah, wear a mask. Other than that, no restrictions. People should come. We'll see you then.
Exciting. Next event. Emily, if you want to talk about bite-sized RPGs.
Sure. So we have a program where you can play tabletop role-playing games over Zoom. Currently doing monthly Thursday Dungeons & Dragons sessions with Noel Keaty, who's our wonderful professional DM. And the next game is next week. There's still 3 registration slots left. If anyone wants to go to bpl.org and sign up, that would be awesome. It's from 3 to 5 on Thursday, and yeah, it's super, super fun. I've been to every one. I'm going to next week's. It'll be great.
Awesome. And the last up for this month, on June 24th, we have a virtual event with representatives from the Gifford Cat Shelter and Canine Last Hope Rescue, and some human employees, and also some kittens and pups. And the humans are going to be talking to teens about careers in animal care, how to get involved in animal welfare as a teen, and also they're going to be talking to you about how do you help your family pets adjust to you going back to normal life and them not getting to see you 24/7 anymore. Very sad, but they'll give some hopeful tips. So yeah, check out all those events. Thank you guys for joining us. You can visit bpl.org/events for more info about all our upcoming events, and hopefully we will see some of you on Monday. Goodbye, everyone.
Never felt that before. The same car over and over, broke down the door. Shut my eyes to dark skies, do not see anymore. To no surprise, in my dreams restored. But really is for sure. The only promise is self-assurance. If I hold my own hand, I bring perseverance. There has to be magic in solidarity. I wish you understanding, but never complacency. Showing up in my full splendor, shining under pressure, all to become a diamond. Showing up in my drive, no ignition, making my fairy tales realistic fiction.